Hi there, it's Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder here with an actual sort of gameplay video, like a format analysis video. I think a lot of people enjoy this. Kind of ranty, not very ranty. I think this is actually legit complaints about this card with Zendikar Rising really pushing it over the top. Very innocuous card, right? Fabled Passage. Now, before I actually get to talking about why I think the Fabled Passage needs to be banned in Standard, let me let you know that there will be some gameplay video. I keep saying when I get time, it is very, very, like, during this, you think I'd have more time during the kind of COVID lockdown than I would otherwise. It's been the opposite because online orders have just gone through the roof, and it's been hard to keep up with them. So I think when things get back to normal, I'll be able to play a lot more Magic, and I do have a sugar daddy that keeps paying me to play Magic, so I need to get some decks out for some cards that Adrian has chosen that I brew with. Very, very tough cards. I don't know how it's going to work, Adrian. You gave me some really, really rough cards to work with. Not going to spoil it here. But the format is very hostile to an archetype that has been picked. But anyway, so the reason why that I have actually been able to make a judgment on Fabled Passage is I have been playing Arena to try to break the meta. And it is just the game-winning card almost every game, whether I have it in my deck or my opponents have it in their deck. And it's I think that people still owe me an apologize, YouTube, when I called Growth Spiral as the problem card in the format, and I got a lot of comments and a lot of other people telling me that how in the world could a card so innocuous like Growth Spiral actually be like a major problem in the format. It goes back to things like Gitaxian Probe or Preordain or Ponder. These type of cards don't look like they're so backbreaking because in a nutshell, by themselves, it's like, oh, just get a basic land. It just helps you filter. But this specific card leads to some very, very broken turns. And if you actually look at the top decks right now, they're all utilizing this Fabled Passage. If you actually play Fabled Passage this way, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the first card, of course, with the mirror is going to be the Ruin Crab. So basically the only time I'm playing a deck right now, I'll showcase the deck tomorrow. Spoiler, what it is just Polukranos Big Mana. I think Polukranos is one of the best cards in the format right now. It just has a great matchup across the board. It's really good versus the Yorion Blink decks or the Doom Foretold decks, which are usually Yorion decks. It's super, super, super good versus any sort of mid-range deck because a 6/6 for 4 usually starts to outclass what your opponent's doing. It has a very good matchup versus like Questing Beast. And it is also insanely good versus Dimir Control because if they mill it in the graveyard, you get it back for 6 mana with a 12/12, and that helps you get back in the mix of things, keeping up card advantage. So Polukranos Big Mana, Ugin's in the deck as well because Ugin just then wins the mid-range battle. I've lost my train of thought what I was talking about Ugin, or with Polukranos. Anyway, that's the only way I lose to this particular deck is Ruin Crab first turn and then some Fabled Passages. If people are so at 6 per Fabled Passage, you can actually get milled half your deck very quickly by Ruin Crab, as this card is just bonkers good. I mean, Hedron Crab was a really good card. This is Hedron Crab all over again. You don't have all the fetch lands to really enable it. But in this particular format, where you get a huge advantage off of your opponent having cards in the graveyard, it then sets up the Into the Stories really fast, and the Drown in the Lock. And I actually don't think that this deck would be nearly as potent. It would still be playable, but without those double Fabled Passage draws, I do not think that this deck would be as popular as it is now. So then if we go over to another one with Gruul Adventures, this one just really utilizes Fabled Passage. You might as well call this Fabled Passage the deck because there are a lot of interactions that are just bonkers with Brushfire Elemental being a second turn into a Fabled Passage for 5 damage. You follow it up with like another Fabled Passage and it's another 5 damage. They're already half their life total down right there. Or like even a Brushfire Elemental with a Fabled Passage with an Ember Cleave is very backbreaking at that point, getting an additional +2/+2, which ends up being 4 damage with the Ember Cleave. And without Fabled Passage, again, I'm not sure that Brushfire Elemental would want this spot in the deck. It'd still be good. It'd still be good on curve, 3/3 for 2 basically, but it wouldn't have the potential of ever getting above the 3/3 unless you're playing something else that fetches the lands. But the really backbreaking thing and why it's so good in the deck that I play, and I actually think that these mono green decks should be running the Fabled Passage, is Kazandu Mammoth plus Great Henge actually happens a lot more than you think. So basically the combo is you put out a Kazando Mammoth on the turn number 3. A lot of times too, if you're playing like a deck that I'm playing with any sort of mana dork, like the 2 mana dork or the Gilded Goose, is you can actually get it out on turn 2 and then drop a Fabled Passage. And the Fabled Passage, I guess it'd still be a turn 3 because you still need that additional mana. But basically the Fabled Passage will get the Kazandu Mammoth up to a 7/7. And then you can cast the Great Henge all the way reduced. And then you have a Great Henge on board incredibly quick, and then you can just start going crazy with the card draw with Great Henge. And without Fabled Passage, again, Kazandu Mammoth just loses a lot of that potential. In this particular deck, it's got that aspect of getting that quick Great Henge out, but it also has the aspect of Ember Cleaving into a massive card with Fabled Passage. And that's why I am thinking for the format, you can't have a landfall-based format with a fetch land. I think that if they wanted to, so I mean, it's so powerful, these people are actually running Evolving Wilds in this particular deck. If they wanted to, they could just go the Evolving Wilds route to get that landfall type effect. It would be so much worse, though, because of the potential of that land coming into play tapped on a very pivotal turn for the untapped land with like Embercleave with a Kazandu Mammoth. It curves perfectly for that turn 3 Kazandu Mammoth, Fabled Passage, crack Fabled Passage, and then get the Embercleave. And even if you attack in with just the Kazandu and one other creature, that's also the perfect 4 mana to then Embercleave. You have an 8/8 double strike, and a lot of times the game's over if you've had like a Brushfile Elemental. And that's also when I play against this particular deck, the draws that I'm losing to. It's not necessarily the adventure aspect of it with Edgewald Innkeeper and Lovestruck Beast and Bonecrusher Giant. It's kind of pathetic, actually, in my opinion, where a lot of these decks have run, and that's why I'm very frustrated again with Standard, is these decks just build themselves. The day of deck building is pretty much gone. Like, I still enjoy trying to tune decks and try to find little niches in decks, but it's getting harder and harder with each passing year with Wizards of the Coast just making these not just autopilot decks, but auto build decks. And if you look at this, it's just basically taking landfall and then taking the adventure strategy from Throne of Eldraine and then just smashing them together, because these cards are just strictly better than anything else you can do in Standard, like Embercleave and the Great Henge. And then you have something like Shatterskull Smashing too, is just ended up being like strictly better than really anything that exists right now in Standard with like the free land, plus it can be a land or a removal spell. That's like exactly what you want it to be in these particular type of decks. Then we have like still the high impact cards of the Edgewald Innkeeper with the Throne of Eldraine having some of the best cards ever printed, the best creatures ever printed in Standard. They're so good that they're still predominantly being played in like even Modern and Pioneer. It was pretty funny is they created Modern Horizons as a way to get modern playable cards into the format without ruining Standard, and then they go ahead and like start doing Throne of Eldraine and even I see Theros on the scope of things is a very high powerful format or set as far as cards that have actually entered into Legacy and Modern. So again, I think that is so layered what you'd have to do to actually make Standard balanced or bring back where people actually brew decks. But same thing, the biggest problem I see with Wizards of the Coast and their design philosophy is these one set blocks. I think that when we had the 3 set blocks, you'd have to wait until that 3rd set came out to really get the potential of a particular theme. And then what they used to do is then they would print the trump card in the next set. So like we'd have a graveyard-based strategy, and then in the next core set they'd put the Scavenging Ooze in there to stop it. Or in the case of back in Ravnica with Innistrad, they printed Rest in Peace. Or then after like Scars of Mirrodin, they printed Stony Silence to then say, okay, you had your fun with this other block. Let's really, it's still gonna be legal in Standard, but here's the hate card that hates out the theme of that block. And these one block sets are really lacking with that. They have to print enough cards to make the deck actually viable, because they're not actually going to go back and visit that strategy. If they're going to do these one block sets, I think they should go something like a one block set, a core set, a one block set, a core set, a one block set, a core set, just to kind of address that and have the core set really either add to the cards that were a little bit lacking for strategies and print the answers that they didn't have to the set before that. And they really haven't done that, and that's a fail in design, complete fail in design. And where this is really, really striking is something like Rogues, where they printed all the Rogues in one set to really just push them. But Cycling is the deck. Let's see if we can actually look at the deck here with Cycling. Are they even playing Cycling now? I still see it on Arena. So cycling. Cycling, they literally just shoved everything in one set. This is a one set that is still a very viable deck. And then it's not out of hand right now because it's a particularly bad matchup with some vulnerable, creatures and stuff to spot removal. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. There's not enough answers, and too many of these or they put too much of this stuff that was just duh, and the deck literally built itself. There was no other way to build this. It's like the perfect amount to build a 60-card deck, and you can't even stray from that. My favorite aspect of Magic the Gathering, even competitive Magic the Gathering, is deck building. And when they take that away from you, I think that Magic is just lacking. And it has been years and years since I felt like that Rogue Brews or even tuning a particular deck has been something of like that is actually viable. And I think we can go back to these formats where you see Gruul Adventures that hits 38% of the meta, or you go before that with like Omnoth or Temur Adventures or Wilderness Reclamation or Fires of Invention, all these things that just completely take over the meta. And it's not only are they just strictly like better than the next things, they are auto build decks, no innovation. It's like, oh, Wizards of the Coast is giving you these clear signs of what wants to be put in a deck. Let's put a Edgewall Innkeeper with a bunch of adventure creatures that not only have an ability, but outclass everything else currently in the format. Let's push these really potent landfall creatures that actually have a lot of synergy with these other cards we're putting in the set. And that's frustrating. I know people complain about like Siege Rhino days and Thragtusk days because it felt like you had to put Thragtusk and Siege Rhino in every deck, but it also, those were mid-range type strategies that help stall the game so that then people could actually adjust and then go their various little win conditions after that. I'd prefer those days of the Siege Rhinos and those days of the Thragtusk over this like new age way of creating Magic where everything is just auto built, where it's not like, okay, at least I have potential in what I could include in my other 56 cards. The entire deck is such a copy pasta deck that it's very, very rough to innovate from that. So again, I think I'm being pretty level-headed for this particular rant video, but Fabled Passage, in my opinion, is one of those sneaky cards like Ponder, Preordain, Gitaxian Probe that on the surface level does not look like it's crazy, but when it's added to all of these things that want to utilize this either going to the graveyard or landfall or whatnot, I think this card gets pushed over the top. Like I didn't even showcase a couple other ones like Fabled Passage in the Rakdos too is just something that helps you get the escape. It is just, in my opinion, this is a Fabled Passage format. It's Fabled Passage standard, and we actually even had Fabled Passage that would have rotated out in Theros if they wouldn't have reprinted it. And now it's just going to stick around. I think they want it to be like an evergreen card like Naturalize. It's just in standard because it seems to be like a better way for Evolving Wilds. But in this, if they're going to do that, they can't have so many abilities that are just like you can't do a graveyard-based deck that wants lands in the graveyard or a landfall-based deck that wants you to fetch lands and then still have it in. Like Fabled Passage should have skipped those sets or skipped at least the time period of that. That is my 2 cents with Fabled Passage. I'm sure I'm going to get flamed in the comments section. Remember, Growth Spiral. Where did you hear Growth Spiral was such a broken card before I was whining about it? I was whining about that card before it was cool to whine about it, and eventually Wizards of the Coast sided with me and realized that was the card that was pushing these decks, because it skipped that 2 to 4, and then you get your Nissa out, and then at that point, controller aggro can't catch up with you, and it's game over. It's the same sort of thing with like Fabled Passage. It leads to these very, very busted all-in games where Fabled Passage was the key card. It was, and that's pretty pathetic that just a land has so much power based upon its ability. So anyway, there is my whine for the day. Feel free to give me a downvote or tell me what a scrub I am. I'll showcase the deck that I'm running with Pelucranos. I ran it from bronze to gold. So it was pretty easy to go from bronze to gold, but that's another thing that just ticks me off about Arena. How come I was only playing tier decks in bronze? Throughout the entire bronze and silver, I might have saw like 1 or 2 decks that were innovative. It was just Gruul after Dimir after Gruul after Dimir after Doom Foretold. Just those top 3 decks over and over and over. And I get it. You have to kind of figure out, you have to like go all in on a deck because you can't trade cards and stuff like that. But beyond that, this is bronze. How bad do you have to be Gruul in bronze? Like that is about the auto. Can you even make mistakes with Gruul? The deck runs itself. Same thing with like Dimir. Like people say, yeah, it's a little bit back and forth, but not really. You stick out your one drop, either it be the rogue, the flash rogue, these skilled enforcer, or ruin crab, and then you're just trying to control the board from then on out and getting the residual mill and whatnot from that. So I don't know. I don't think they're very skill intensive decks. That's one of my other complaints right now about Magic the Gathering, is that kind of tit for tat, outplaying your opponent is something in the past with all these like high impact cards. Answers that just answer everything, and a lot of these cards too that are just plain I win buttons if you get to a certain amount of mana. But anyway, there you have it. You got a video from me. I will show some brews. I will try to get to Adrian's crazy cards that he wants me to build. I'll look forward to going 1-9 with that deck. Hopefully we're going to eke out one win. Maybe I'll actually go 4-0 and just make it look like or go like 4-40, but make it look like I go 4-0 and only record the decks that I actually won with and make it look like the best thing ever. Not calling out any particular creators, or maybe I am. But anyway, yeah, be looking forward to that crazy brew. I want to get back to the rogue deck building. You've seen that it's a lot more financial on this channel, or fluff on this channel. It's very, very tough. While I'm doing most of the things at the store without having that time without getting like interrupted to actually do things. So we'll get to that. Anyway, this has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.